The hushed conversations at La Stella faded to whispers as Hiroki Takeda stepped through the entrance, his tailored suit and commanding presence drawing all eyes. His entourage followed in perfect formation, creating an immediate shift in the restaurant's atmosphere as patrons sensed the arrival of significant power. The maître d' struggled to communicate with the stone-faced Japanese man, whose English was minimal and whose patience was clearly waning. Behind him, 4 men in impeccable suits remained expressionless, their vigilant eyes scanning the restaurant for any potential threats. Amelia Bennett watched the scene unfold from across the room, her hand pausing mid-pour as she served wine to another table. Something about the frustration in the Japanese man's eyes struck a chord with her, reminding her of her own isolation when she'd first returned from Tokyo. 3 years teaching English in Japan had gifted her with fluency that few in this Midwestern city possessed. Now working at La Stella to pay off student loans, she never imagined her language skills would be relevant in this Italian fine dining establishment. The maître d' was visibly sweating now, gesturing awkwardly at the menu while Hiroki's expression darkened with each passing moment. The tension was building as nearby diners began to whisper behind their hands, sensing the brewing storm. "David, I can help," Amelia said quietly to her manager as she approached the front desk. "I speak Japanese." The look of relief that washed over her boss's face was almost comical as he stepped aside with obvious gratitude. Bowing slightly, Amelia addressed the imposing man in flawless Japanese, explaining the evening's specialties and offering to personally attend to his party. The transformation in Hiroki's expression was immediate. Surprise followed quickly by intrigue. His men exchanged glances, clearly unsettled by this unexpected development in an unfamiliar city. Only Hiroki smiled, a subtle upturning of his lips that didn't quite reach his calculating eyes as he assessed the American waitress who spoke his language like a native. "How unusual to find someone who speaks Japanese so well in this place," he remarked, switching to his native tongue with evident relief. "Perhaps this evening won't be a complete waste after all." Amelia led them to the best table in the house, acutely aware of the eyes following them across the dining room. She could feel the weight of attention from both Hiroki's men and the other diners, creating a strange spotlight effect she hadn't anticipated. 2 men at the bar watched with particular interest, local crime figures who recognized a foreign power when they saw one. Their whispered conversation grew heated as they observed the unexpected connection forming between the waitress and the Japanese visitors. Carlo Vittori tapped his glass nervously, his eyes never leaving the Japanese group. "That's Hiroki Takeda," he murmured to his companion. "Yakuza leadership from the West Coast, expanding territory. And now he's found someone who speaks his language." Word spread quickly through the restaurant staff. The dangerous-looking Japanese men had requested that Amelia be their exclusive server. Manager David hesitated before approaching her in the kitchen, concern evident on his face as he explained who they believed their guests to be. "Be careful with them, Amelia," David warned, glancing nervously toward the dining room. "Just serve them well and don't get involved. Men like that are nothing but trouble, no matter what language they speak." Amelia nodded obediently, but as she pushed through the swinging door with a tray of appetizers, she couldn't help feeling a strange sense of destiny. Something significant had just begun, connecting her small world to something much larger and more dangerous than she had ever imagined. Hiroki savored the bruschetta, nodding appreciatively as Amelia described each dish in Japanese. His men remained stoic, but their rigid posture relaxed slightly as the evening progressed, the familiar language creating an unexpected bubble of comfort. "Your Japanese is exceptional," Hiroki commented, studying her with renewed interest. "Few Americans take the time to truly understand our language, let alone the subtleties of proper address and honorifics." Amelia explained her years in Tokyo, teaching English while immersing herself in the culture. She spoke of cherry blossom festivals and quiet temples, of calligraphy classes and the elderly neighbor who'd treated her like a daughter, patiently correcting her pronunciation. Nostalgia softened Hiroki's typically guarded expression, as Amelia's descriptions transported him momentarily back to his homeland. For a brief moment, the feared Yakuza boss was simply a Japanese man far from home, finding unexpected connection in a foreign city. "I miss the sound of temple bells in the morning," he admitted, surprising himself with the personal disclosure. His lieutenants exchanged glances, unused to seeing this side of their typically stoic leader. Carlo and his associate continued their surveillance from the bar, tension evident in their rigid postures. The unexpected rapport between the waitress and the Yakuza boss complicated matters, introducing an unpredictable element to an already volatile situation. As the main course arrived, Hiroki dismissed his guards to a separate table, an unprecedented move that signaled his growing comfort. Alone now with Amelia as she served his Wagyu steak, he spoke more freely, asking about her experiences in his homeland. Their conversation flowed naturally between courses, shifting from formal exchanges to more personal territory. Hiroki described his hometown near Kyoto, careful to omit details of his professional life while sharing memories of his childhood landscape with unexpected eloquence. Language is more than words, he mused, swirling his wine thoughtfully. It carries culture, history, a way of seeing the world that cannot be translated simply by exchanging vocabulary. Amelia nodded in understanding, sharing how Japanese had changed her perception, teaching her patience and attention to detail. The conversation deepened as they discovered shared perspectives, despite their vastly different lives. Across the room, 2 new patrons entered the restaurant, their arrival causing Hiroki's men to straighten alertly. The newcomers' expensive suits and vigilant demeanor marked them as members of the local crime family, their territorial interest in the foreign visitors evident. Outside the restaurant windows, a black SUV pulled up silently, its tinted windows concealing the occupants who watched the establishment with predatory focus. The delicate peace of the evening balanced on a knife's edge of competing interests and unspoken agendas. The dinner service continued smoothly on the surface, but Amelia began to notice subtle shifts in the atmosphere. Hiroki's occasional glances toward the newcomers betrayed his awareness of their presence, though his conversation remained focused solely on her. Sometimes the most valuable connections are found in unexpected places, Hiroki said cryptically, his eyes meeting hers with an intensity that communicated more than his carefully chosen words. Don't you find that to be true, Amelia? The evening wound down as Hiroki requested the check, leaving a generous tip that made Amelia's eyes widen. Before departing, he pressed a business card into her palm, the heavy cardstock embossed with gold characters. "If you ever need anything," he said simply. 3 days later, Amelia found herself staring at Hiroki's business card, turning it over repeatedly in her fingers as she contemplated the strange connection they'd formed. Something about his carefully controlled demeanor had intrigued her, hinting at depths she couldn't quite fathom. The restaurant had been unusually busy since that night, with unfamiliar faces appearing among the regular clientele. Sharp-eyed men in expensive suits lingered at the bar, their attention seemingly casual, but unmistakably focused on Amelia's movements throughout her shifts. David pulled her aside near the end of her Thursday service, his typically calm demeanor replaced with obvious concern. "Those men at table 7 have been asking questions about you and your Japanese guests from the other night," he whispered urgently. Leaving work that evening, Amelia noticed a black sedan parked across the street, its engine running despite the late hour. A prickle of unease ran down her spine as she quickened her pace, the sound of footsteps behind her triggering a surge of adrenaline. "Ms. Bennett," a smooth voice called from the shadows, belonging to a tall man with a face that seemed crafted to be forgettable. "My employer would appreciate a moment of your time to discuss your new acquaintances." The man identified himself as working for Joseph Bianchi, a name that even Amelia recognized from local news reports detailing suspected criminal enterprises. The invitation to chat was delivered politely, but carried an unmistakable edge of compulsion. "Your friendship with Takeda is problematic for certain local business interests," the man explained as he guided her toward the idling car. "Mr. Bianchi simply wishes to understand the nature of your relationship with our Japanese visitors." Inside the luxurious vehicle, Joseph Bianchi himself waited, his silver hair and tailored suit projecting an image of respectability that his reputation thoroughly contradicted. His smile never reached his eyes as he questioned her about Hiroki's intentions in their city. "I'm just a waitress who happens to speak Japanese," Amelia insisted, her heart racing despite her outward calm. "We talked about Tokyo, about food and culture, nothing more." Bianchi studied her face with the practiced scrutiny of a man accustomed to detecting lies. "Takeda doesn't enter new territory without purpose," he said flatly. "And he doesn't share meals with people who don't serve his interests." The implied accusation hung in the air between them, the silence stretching uncomfortably before Bianchi continued. "When he contacts you again, and he will, I expect to be informed immediately. Consider it a civic duty to maintain peace in our community." After being released from the uncomfortable meeting, Amelia hurried to her apartment, hands shaking as she locked her door. The business card seemed to burn in her pocket, a tangible connection to a world she'd glimpsed but never intended to enter. Morning brought no relief, as she discovered Hiroki himself, waiting at a cafe across from her apartment building. His solitary presence without his usual entourage somehow made him appear more dangerous rather than less, like a predator confident enough to hunt alone. "I apologize for the intrusion," he said in Japanese, as she reluctantly joined him, sliding a cup of coffee across the table. "But I needed to speak with you away from interested observers." Hiroki explained that his presence in the city was business-related, involving negotiations with certain local enterprises. Her unexpected ability to serve as translator had complicated matters, placing her squarely between opposing forces neither willing to trust outsiders. "Bianchi's men approached you last night," he stated, rather than asked, his expression darkening at her surprised confirmation. "You've become a variable in an equation that was already precariously balanced." "I can help you," Amelia said, surprising herself with the offer that escaped her lips before she could consider its implications. "If translating during your negotiations would settle things peacefully, I'm willing to do it." Hiroki's dark eyes studied her face, searching for ulterior motives or fear beneath her determined expression. His fingers tapped lightly against the table, as he considered the unprecedented proposition from this civilian who'd inadvertently stepped into his world. "You understand that once you enter this room, these men will never again see you as just a waitress," he warned, his voice dropping to ensure privacy. "You will become part of something that cannot be easily left behind." Amelia thought of her mundane life, the endless student loan payments, the apartment with peeling paint, the string of dates with men who found her fascination with Japanese culture strange rather than interesting. Perhaps this dangerous deviation was exactly what she needed. "The meeting will take place tomorrow evening in the private dining room at La Stella," Hiroki explained, sliding a sleek phone across the table. "Use this to contact me only. It's secure and untraceable." The weight of the decision settled on Amelia's shoulders as she walked home, the new phone heavy in her pocket. She had glimpsed the dangerous waters beneath Hiroki's calm surface, yet found herself drawn to his world of unspoken rules and hidden power. That evening, she researched Joseph Bianchi thoroughly, uncovering news articles about suspected illegal operations and charitable contributions alike. The local crime figure maintained a veneer of legitimacy that Hiroki, as a foreign operator, couldn't access. A text message illuminated her new phone near midnight. "Their territory, our terms. Be prepared for resistance." The cryptic warning from Hiroki kept her awake until dawn, questioning the wisdom of her impulsive offer. The private dining room glowed with subdued lighting when Amelia arrived the next evening, her black dress a deliberate choice to blend into the background. David's questioning glance followed her as she bypassed her regular station to head toward the back of the restaurant. Hiroki waited alone, his usual guards positioned discreetly outside the room. His approving nod at her attire confirmed she had correctly understood the need to appear professional rather than conspicuous for this unusual meeting. "Remember, translate exactly, without embellishment or omission," he instructed, adjusting his platinum cufflinks. "Their words may be hostile, but your voice must remain neutral. You are simply a conduit between worlds." The heavy oak door swung open as Joseph Bianchi arrived with 2 associates, their expressions hardening at the sight of Amelia standing beside Hiroki. Recognition flickered in Bianchi's eyes, followed quickly by calculation as he reassessed the situation. "I see our waitress has chosen sides rather quickly," Bianchi remarked coldly, his gaze shifting between Amelia and Hiroki. "I thought we had an understanding, Ms. Bennett." Amelia maintained her composure as she translated Hiroki's response. "She has chosen no side but understanding. Without her, we would be reduced to primitive gestures, rather than meaningful negotiation." The tension in the room gradually shifted as the men began discussing business through Amelia's translations. She discovered that Hiroki sought permission to establish legitimate shipping operations through the port facilities that Bianchi's organization controlled. Hours of negotiation yielded tentative agreements, with Hiroki offering generous compensation for access to distribution channels controlled by Bianchi's organization. Amelia's precise translations built a bridge between the 2 powerful men, each testing the other's boundaries. "Tell him I accept his terms for a 6-month trial period," Bianchi finally stated, his earlier hostility replaced with business-like pragmatism. "But any deviation from our agreement will be considered a declaration of war." As they prepared to leave, Bianchi gripped Amelia's arm firmly, his voice dropping to a whisper. "Your usefulness to him will eventually expire, and when it does, remember who truly controls this city." The warning lingered in Amelia's mind, as Hiroki escorted her to his waiting car, insisting on driving her home after the tense negotiations. The comfortable silence between them reflected a new level of trust, forged in the pressure of the evening. "You performed admirably," Hiroki commented as the car glided through the dark streets. Few could maintain such precision while standing between predators. Amelia's apartment seemed particularly small and shabby when Hiroki insisted on walking her to her door, his critical gaze taking in the worn carpet and flickering hallway lights. Without comment, he stationed one of his men in the parking lot below her window. Morning brought a courier with an envelope containing a substantial cash payment and a note in elegant Japanese script. For services rendered with honor, the first installment of many. The amount would cover 3 months of her rent and a significant portion of her student debt. Conflicting emotions warred within her as she stared at the money. Relief at the financial breathing room, unease at how easily she'd stepped into this gray world, and an undeniable thrill at being valued for skills she'd acquired purely for love of a culture. Her shift at La Stella that evening felt surreal, serving pasta and pouring wine, as if the previous night's high-stakes negotiation had been a dream. Only David's concerned glances and the occasional black-suited man dining alone confirmed her new reality. A week of relative normalcy passed before Amelia noticed the tail, a nondescript sedan that appeared too frequently in her rearview mirror. Whether Bianchi's surveillance or protection from Hiroki, the constant watching eyes created a persistent unease. The delicate peace shattered on a quiet Tuesday evening when Amelia returned to find her apartment door slightly ajar. Inside, drawers had been methodically emptied, her personal papers examined but nothing apparently stolen. A message rather than a robbery. Her trembling fingers dialed Hiroki's secure line, his calm voice answering on the first ring. "They're testing boundaries," he explained after hearing her description. "Pack essentials. My driver will collect you in 20 minutes. The sleek black car whisked her to an elegant high-rise downtown, where Hiroki maintained a penthouse suite for business visits. The contrast between her modest apartment and this luxurious space emphasized the vast difference between their worlds. Amelia ran her fingers along the spines of leather-bound books in Hiroki's study, Japanese classics alongside Western economics texts and maritime law volumes, revealing intellectual depths she hadn't anticipated in a man defined by others solely through fear. The carefully curated collection spoke of a mind seeking understanding beyond the boundaries of his inherited world. Through floor-to-ceiling windows, the city sprawled below like a circuit board of lights and shadows, neighborhoods divided by invisible boundaries more powerful than any physical wall. From this elevated perspective, the territories that men killed to control seemed simultaneously vast and insignificant against the backdrop of the greater metropolitan expanse. "You'll be safe here until we determine the extent of Bianchi's intentions," Hiroki explained, showing her to a guest suite with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city. "My men will retrieve whatever you need from your apartment tomorrow." Dawn painted the city skyline in hues of gold and pink as Amelia sipped tea by the window, contemplating how rapidly her ordinary life had transformed. The expensive porcelain cup in her hands seemed to symbolize her transition from observer to participant in Hiroki's world. Her phone chimed with a message from her manager. "Where are you? Bianchi's nephew is here asking questions. Call me." The growing ripples of her involvement threatened to engulf her workplace and colleagues, innocent bystanders to her choices. Hiroki entered the living room in an immaculate suit, his calm demeanor a stark contrast to her internal turmoil. "My associates have intercepted communications suggesting Bianchi believes you understand more than you translated," he informed her, his voice carefully neutral. The accusation hung in the air between them, a dangerous misunderstanding that could escalate the fragile truce into open conflict. Amelia struggled to comprehend how her precise translations could have been misconstrued as deception. Memories of her grandmother's warnings about getting involved with powerful men flashed through Amelia's mind. The elderly woman had fled war-torn Europe decades ago, carrying nothing but wisdom earned through suffering and a fierce determination to protect her family from future harm. "There are moments that define us," her grandmother had said, "not by the choices presented, but by our courage to seek options others cannot see." Those words resonated now, as Amelia found herself caught between criminal empires, searching for a third path. Rain began tapping against the penthouse windows, the gentle rhythm providing a momentary distraction from the tension in the room. Hiroki moved to adjust the blinds, his silhouette against the stormy backdrop revealing a moment of unguarded vulnerability rarely displayed. A notification on Hiroki's secure tablet revealed surveillance photos of Bianchi meeting with port officials earlier that day. The images showed animated conversation and the exchange of documents, suggesting preparations for a move against Hiroki's shipping interests were already underway. "My grandfather believed that true influence lies not in controlling territory, but in becoming essential to all who operate within it, Hiroki said, his voice softer than usual as he shared a rare personal insight. Perhaps your role embodies his philosophy more than my own approach has. I need to know what you're really involved in, Amelia demanded suddenly, her fear transforming into determination. If I'm risking my life, I deserve the complete truth about what I've stepped into. Hiroki's expression remained impassive, but something shifted in his eyes. Respect, perhaps, for her courage. Without speaking, he gestured for her to follow him into his home office, where a digital map displayed his organization's legitimate business holdings. My family has controlled shipping routes across the Pacific for generations, he explained, his finger tracing lines between ports. What began as traditional Yakuza operations has evolved into legitimate enterprise, though the old ways still inform our methods. Amelia listened intently as Hiroki revealed his true purpose, establishing legal trade relationships that would eventually allow his organization to transition completely away from criminal enterprises. Bianchi's territories represented the final link in his legitimate supply chain. The old guard resists change, Hiroki continued, his usually stoic expression revealing a flash of frustration. Bianchi sees only threat, not opportunity, in our evolution toward legitimacy. A sharp knock interrupted their conversation, as Hiroki's lieutenant entered with urgent news. Bianchi's men had been observed meeting with a rival Yakuza family from the East Coast, suggesting an alliance against Hiroki's interests. They will move against us soon, Hiroki concluded, his tactical mind already formulating countermeasures. You must decide now, Amelia. Disappear with our help to start a new life elsewhere, or stand with us through what comes. The weight of the choice pressed on her as images flashed through her mind. Her simple life as a waitress, the unexpected respect she'd found in Hiroki's world, the danger that now surrounded both options. No path led back to the safety of her former existence. I want to help negotiate peace, she decided finally, squaring her shoulders despite her racing heart. I'm the only link between these worlds, the only one who understands both sides without decades of prejudice and rivalry. Hiroki studied her with newfound interest, seeing not just a useful translator, but a strategist who recognized leverage others had overlooked. Her unique position as an outsider might indeed offer possibilities that traditional approaches couldn't achieve. Your courage honors us, he said formally, bowing slightly in a gesture that communicated genuine respect. But understand that Bianchi may see your intervention as further proof of alignment with our interests, rather than as neutral mediation. Amelia insisted on returning to La Stella that evening, believing the public venue would provide some measure of safety for the meeting she had arranged. Hiroki reluctantly agreed, positioning his men strategically throughout the restaurant while maintaining a respectful distance. The private dining room had been prepared with meticulous attention to diplomatic details, a neutral space with equal seating arrangements and no symbolic advantages for either party. Amelia had selected the wines herself, choosing labels from neither Italian nor Japanese vineyards. When Bianchi arrived with his nephew and consigliere, his expression darkened upon seeing Amelia standing independently rather than at Hiroki's side. Her deliberate positioning in the center of the room communicated her intention to serve as mediator rather than partisan. Gentlemen, she began in English, her voice steady despite her racing heart. I've asked you here because miscommunication threatens to destroy a potentially beneficial arrangement for both your organizations. Bianchi scoffed openly, his weathered hand gesturing dismissively. This girl presumes to lecture men who've negotiated territorial disputes since before she was born. Your naivety is charming but dangerous, Ms. Bennett. Undeterred, Amelia continued in Japanese, explaining to Hiroki that the perceived slight was posturing rather than genuine dismissal. Her nuanced translation softened the insult, while preserving the essential message, demonstrating her value immediately. Ask him why he met with the Tanaka family, Hiroki demanded in Japanese, his composure betrayed only by the slight tensing of his shoulders. Their presence in this territory violates the preliminary agreements we established. The accusation hung in the air as Amelia translated, her inflection carefully neutral despite the dangerous territory they were entering. Bianchi's expression shifted from dismissive to calculating as he realized Hiroki's intelligence network had reached further than anticipated. Business insurance, Bianchi replied after a tense silence, his eyes never leaving Hiroki's face even as he addressed Amelia. Your employer's reputation precedes him. The Takeda family has eliminated partners after gaining territorial footholds. As Amelia translated this accusation, she noticed a subtle change in Hiroki's expression, not anger at the insult, but something closer to recognition. The reputation that preceded him was based on his father's methods, not his own evolving approach to business. "Tell him," Hiroki said quietly, "that the old ways die with the old generation. My father's methods served their purpose in their time, but I seek sustainability, not conquest." Before Amelia could translate, the restaurant's ambient noise diminished abruptly, the normal dining sounds replaced by hurried footsteps and urgent whispers. Through the partially open door, she glimpsed David ushering regular patrons toward the exits. "We have company," Bianchi's nephew announced, his hand moving instinctively toward his jacket. "Tanaka's men just entered the main dining room, at least 6 that I can see." The fragile diplomatic bubble burst as both Hiroki and Bianchi realized the implications simultaneously. They had been maneuvered into position by a third party seeking to eliminate both territorial claims in one strategic move. A delicate teacup shattered on the marble floor as a waiter fled the increasingly volatile situation, the sound crystallizing the moment when casual dining patrons became unwitting witnesses to an underworld power struggle. Several elderly couples abandoned half-eaten desserts as they hurried toward the exits. "We've been watching Tanaka's movements for weeks," Bianchi's consigliere admitted, pulling up security footage on his phone showing unfamiliar Japanese men photographing the restaurant's layout days earlier. "We suspected they might make a move, but not during our negotiation." Hiroki's expression hardened into something ancient and dangerous, revealing the heritage of violence that underpinned his modern business facade. His hand moved subtly, adjusting his tie clip, a movement Amelia now recognized as checking access to the concealed blade within. Through the chaos, Amelia noticed David ushering the kitchen staff toward safety, the restaurant manager's previous suspicions about her new associates now validated in the most terrifying way. Their eyes met briefly across the room, his expression conveying both accusation and concern. The distinctive click of safety catches being released echoed in the sudden silence as bodyguards from both factions readied weapons, their previous adversarial positioning instantly reconfigured into a defensive perimeter around their respective leaders. The choreography of violence required no translation. "They waited until we were together, distracted by negotiations," Hiroki concluded grimly, nodding to his lieutenant who immediately began coordinating their defense through a discreet earpiece. "This was always their plan." "We need to move," Bianchi directed, his earlier antagonism toward Hiroki instantly replaced by the pragmatism of shared danger. "The kitchen has a service exit that leads to the alley behind the building." Amelia's restaurant knowledge suddenly became tactical intelligence, as she quickly described the building's layout to both men, identifying potential escape routes and defensible positions. Her calm assessment earned a surprised look of approval from Bianchi's consigliere. The sound of breaking glass from the main dining room accelerated their decision-making, with Hiroki's security chief reporting that Tanaka's men were methodically securing all visible exits. Their coordinated movements suggested this attack had been planned for days. "My car is 2 blocks east with additional men," Hiroki offered, his tactical mind already shifting from escape to counteroffense. "If we can reach it, we have both manpower and weapons advantage." Bianchi nodded in agreement, years of street warfare experience evident in his quick strategic assessment. "My nephew will lead through the kitchen, while my men create a diversion near the main entrance to draw their attention away from our movement." As they prepared to execute their hasty escape plan, Amelia found herself being handed a small-caliber pistol by Bianchi's consigliere. "Just in case," he explained with a grim smile. "You've become too valuable to lose in the crossfire." The cool metal felt foreign in her hand, its deadly purpose a stark reminder of how far she had traveled from her former life in just 2 weeks. Hiroki noticed her discomfort, but said nothing, respecting her right to protect herself in a world she hadn't chosen. Their unlikely alliance moved in practiced formation through the kitchen, where terrified staff huddled beneath stainless steel counters. Amelia paused briefly to reassure David, promising explanations that she wasn't entirely certain she could deliver. The service corridor narrowed as they approached the exit, forcing them to proceed in single file through the tight space. The vulnerability of their position wasn't lost on anyone, each footstep measured and deliberate to minimize sound. The heavy metal door swung open to reveal the narrow alleyway bathed in the harsh glow of security lights. Freedom seemed tantalizingly close, until the distinctive silhouettes of armed men appeared at both ends of the passage, effectively trapping them. "Takeda-san," a voice called out in Japanese from the shadows. "Your father sends his regards and his disappointment. The family council has deemed your American venture unconventional." The revelation struck Amelia with stunning clarity. Hiroki wasn't just expanding territory. He was defying his family's traditional operations. His pursuit of legitimacy represented internal rebellion as much as external business strategy. The weight of generational expectations pressed upon Hiroki's shoulders, visible in the momentary slump that betrayed his usually perfect posture. His father's generation had survived post-war economic devastation through fierce adherence to codes that seemed increasingly obsolete in a globalized world. A distant siren wailed, reminding everyone that beyond their shadowed world of honor codes and territorial disputes, the ordinary city continued functioning. Some concerned citizen had likely reported the disturbance, adding police intervention to their growing list of complications. "My grandfather would appreciate the irony," Bianchi muttered, checking his weapon with practiced efficiency. "He always said our greatest threat would come from within, not from foreign interests or law enforcement." Streetlight illuminated the rain-slicked pavement at both ends of the alley, creating glowing boundaries to their temporary sanctuary. The metallic scent of approaching storms mixed with the restaurant's lingering aromas of garlic and wine, creating a surreal sensory backdrop to their precarious situation. Amelia's university professors would never have imagined their meticulous language instruction would culminate in this moment, their promising student applying honorific speech patterns and cultural nuances, not to diplomatic core work as they'd envisioned, but to prevent bloodshed between criminal organizations. A tense standoff ensued, with Bianchi's men instinctively forming a defensive position alongside Hiroki's security detail. Former adversaries now stood shoulder to shoulder, their combined force creating momentary hesitation among the Tanaka soldiers. "Tell them who I am," Amelia suddenly whispered to Hiroki, an audacious plan forming in her mind. "Tell them I'm your diplomatic envoy, formally recognized under the old codes." Hiroki's eyes widened slightly at her suggestion, invoking ancient Yakuza protocols that protected designated messengers between families, even during active conflicts. It was a desperate gambit based on her limited understanding of their honor systems. "This woman stands under my protection as registered diplomatic counsel," Hiroki declared formally in Japanese, using ceremonial language that hadn't been invoked in decades. Her neutral status is recognized by both the Takeda and Bianchi organizations. The unexpected invocation of traditional code created visible uncertainty among Tanaka's men, their weapons lowering slightly as they exchanged glances. Ancient respect for messenger protocols conflicted with their modern mission parameters. Seizing the moment of hesitation, Amelia stepped forward with deliberate calm, addressing the Tanaka lieutenant directly in formal Japanese. "I request parley under the old ways, with witnesses from all three families present." The boldness of her request, coming from an American woman in the middle of a Yakuza conflict, created a surreal pause in the violence. Cultural reverence for tradition battled against tactical objectives, as the Tanaka lieutenant visibly struggled with the unexpected development. "The council chamber at the Harbor Hotel," the lieutenant finally responded, naming a neutral location respected by all the city's criminal enterprises. 1 hour, 3 representatives from each family, unarmed. As the standoff dissolved into tense but non-violent withdrawal, Bianchi turned to Amelia with newfound respect in his eyes. "Where did you learn about diplomatic council status in Yakuza protocol? That knowledge isn't in any language textbook I've ever encountered." "My elderly neighbor in Tokyo," she explained, her hands still trembling from adrenaline. Her father had been Oyabun of a small family before the war. She told stories I never imagined would become relevant to my life. The Harbor Hotel's council chamber had witnessed decades of underworld negotiations, its elegant decor concealing the often violent histories of those who gathered there. Amelia entered flanked by Hiroki and Bianchi, their unprecedented cooperation drawing curious glances. The Tanaka representatives arrived precisely on time, their formal attire and ceremonial manners reflecting the gravity with which they approached this unusual summit. The eldest among them, a distinguished man with silver temples, bowed respectfully to Amelia. "We recognize the American Diplomatic Council," he stated formally in Japanese, acknowledging her status before addressing Hiroki directly. "Your father's concerns focus on abandonment of tradition, not expansion of territory." Through Amelia's precise translations, a remarkable dialogue unfolded, Hiroki articulating his vision of evolution rather than abandonment, Bianchi describing the economic advantages of legitimacy, and the Tanaka elder gradually revealing his own family's struggle with changing times. The distant harbor lights blinked through the chamber's tall windows, reminding all present of the maritime commerce that had sustained their organizations for generations. Ships from across the Pacific silently docked and departed, carrying legitimate cargo alongside carefully hidden contraband, a physical manifestation of the dualities they now discussed. My daughter studies international business at university, the Tanaka elder revealed unexpectedly, his weathered face softening momentarily. She speaks of supply chain transparency and corporate governance with the same passion my father once discussed territory and tribute. Photographs of previous generations of leaders lined the wood-paneled walls, stern-faced men whose unwavering gazes seemed to judge their descendants' contemplation of change. Tradition hung heavy in the room, both burden and foundation for the unprecedented conversation taking place. Bianchi removed his suit jacket as the night progressed, revealing ornate tattoos peeking from beneath his crisp shirt cuffs, visual evidence of his own journey through old traditions before embracing the veneer of legitimate business. The gesture symbolized a lowering of barriers rarely witnessed in cross-family meetings. A detailed map of the city port facilities spread across the antique table, coffee cups and water glasses weighing down its corners, as three men who had spent decades maneuvering against each other now traced potential collaborative shipping routes with surprising enthusiasm. Their fingers occasionally overlapped on the paper, decades of ingrained suspicion temporarily suspended. The old ways preserved us through occupation, war, and economic collapse, the Tanaka elder reflected, his weathered face solemn. But perhaps preservation and adaptation are not mutually exclusive concepts. As dawn approached, a framework emerged that would have seemed impossible hours earlier, a collaborative business model incorporating all three families, with legitimate operations supported by traditional honor structures rather than violence. The waitress who speaks our language has become the architect of our future, the Tanaka elder remarked with subtle humor as they prepared to depart. Perhaps this is what the old stories meant about strength coming from unexpected sources. 2 months later, Amelia stood in Lustella's newly renovated private dining room, now officially designated as neutral ground for ongoing negotiations between the families. Her position as recognized diplomatic counsel had evolved into a formal role with responsibilities and privileges she was still learning to navigate. Hiroki entered alone, his customary security detail now unnecessary in this carefully established neutral territory. Their relationship had evolved beyond translator and client, into a partnership built on mutual respect and shared vision for bridging worlds. The first shipments cleared customs yesterday, he reported, satisfaction evident in his typically reserved expression. My father has requested to meet the American woman who accomplished what 3 generations of conflict could not. The invitation to Tokyo represented both professional recognition and personal milestone. Amelia's accidental involvement in their world had transformed not only her life, but the very power structures she had inadvertently influenced. Thank you all for following this story. If you're enjoying it, write in the comments where you're watching from, and don't forget to like, subscribe, and share the video, because your support is important for me to continue here.